Welcome to Fed Pride. Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. It looks like today for me, it's the 20th of September. For you, it's probably the 24th or 25th of September, or any time for the next month, because I'm not going to have another show until probably October 17th. So what's going on? Well, for good or ill, what's going on for me, I'm going to put America over here, and Washington is about there. And what's going on for me is the House just passed a continuing resolution that defunds Obamacare, knowing that the president is going to veto it, and that if the president does veto it and they don't do anything about it, there's going to be a shutdown of the government. Now, there have been government shutdowns before, and they were unpleasant and upsetting, but they really didn't affect very much. And the reason is because Congress was at least semi-functional in the past. Ever since the Republicans have taken over Congress, we basically have not had a budget, period. We've only had continuing resolutions. So not a single budget bill has actually passed the Congress at all, which means that if the government does shut down, everything shuts down. There's no money to pay soldiers. There's no money to pay federal workers. There's no money. People will still show up because they'll hand out IOUs, and people know that they're going to get paid someday when the disaster is over. And that has happened a couple times before. I myself was furloughed twice during my career, and the reason I was furloughed is because I was definitely unessential, even though my supervisors and all those guys still went to work. So supposedly without pay, but eventually I got paid back for the work that I did or the work that I was there to do. So, and I got my leave and so on and so forth. So the federal employees have already been getting furloughed. The furloughs are due to the sequester and not as bad as otherwise. So if the Republicans just passed a continuing resolution, the sequester would still continue. There'd still be lower spending. However, a certain presidential aspiring candidate, pretty new Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, has been going on the stump, upsetting all the Tea Party people, of which there really aren't that many, but they do vote in Republican primaries, and saying that we've got to defund Obamacare. If we don't defund Obamacare, it's going to go into effect, and it will be a train wreck waiting to happen. However, a lot of Obamacare has gone into effect. Basically, insurance companies are not allowed to reject people that have pre-existing conditions. The system didn't collapse. All the children of the baby boomers and so on and so forth can continue on their parents' insurance until they're 26. That basically prevented disasters during this recession for a lot of people. A lot of people did lose their insurance. And the exchanges are being set up, whether people like it or not. The Republicans are upset because the employer mandate was postponed a year, and yet everybody still has to get get insured. And isn't that unfair? And blah, 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 blah. Why they gave small businesses a break and let them skate for a year, I don't know. Guess they didn't want to upset them. But the main thing that didn't happen is the insurance companies did have to pay back amounts above, overhead amounts above 20%. back to the people, and there were checks that were issued, which was very upsetting to business and to Fox News and people. How dare they make insurance companies pay back for unnecessary expenses? That's an insult. That is interrupting the freedom. I don't know whose freedom, I guess the freedom of insurance company executives, blah, 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 blah. However, insurance is one of the most regulated industries throughout the history of the United States. And the old system, which the Republicans say is the best system of health care ever created, was basically a government system developed during the 60s when marginal taxes were very high, and set up a big giant tax break so that companies would cover their employees, and basically health insurance became part of being employed. Now, in those days, people stayed in their jobs pretty much for their life. Now almost nobody does. Nobody stays in a job more than 3 or 4 years. And basically, except for COBRA, which is this government program where that you can keep your insurance if you pay the company side, basically your entire unemployment during your period between jobs, then you can keep your company insurance. Now, all the systems that were there before Obamacare, basically the bottom line was either by business, by company, but worst of all, by person. The insurance companies basically calculated your lifetime health care, divided by the number of years that you're going to be, added a surplus for themselves, added an overhead of 20 or 25 or 30%, added a profit, and that's how they fixed your premium. Basically, you were a risk pool of one person or one family, or you were a risk person or a risk pool of one company. Now, a risk pool of one company, if you're the size of General Dynamics, might be a decent rate or Raytheon. However, a risk pool for a small business was confiscatory, basically. Basically, the insurance companies were confiscating money from the rest of the economy. And as the health insurance kept on skyrocketing, the old system was basically knocking out everybody with pre-existing conditions, everybody whose family had a pre-existing condition, or anybody in the family had one, any small business that had anybody that wasn't just only low-risk people, and basically locking out the entire single and single-person insurance. So unless you could get group insurance, you were doomed. And the insurance industry was doomed. And they even started to realize that way back even during Clinton, because eventually everybody, or at least half the people, would be uninsurable. And the minute that happened, the political pressure would be on to the point where the insurance industry would be done away with, and there would be Medicare for all. Because basically, Medicare has an overhead of 3 to 5%, 3% to do all of the processing and everything like that. I actually worked on TRICARE management pricing, which is another federal system that covered military spouses. And the bottom line is there is a centralized database, a centralized everything. Millions and millions of people are in it. Basically, all of the potential diseases, I have a code for in there. And everybody that deals in Medicare follows the same set of rules and does the same system. And the result is they have a very, very low overhead compared to insurance companies. Let's take into account that health insurance companies don't provide any health care to anybody. They don't do anything. all they do is take your money and pay out your money. That's it. They don't help anybody. They don't save anybody. They don't give anybody an operation. They are just a layer of bureaucracy. So the real question was, are we going to have 200 or 500 or 1,000 layers of bureaucracy, or are we going to have one? Well, the Republicans fought tooth and nail, and so did the industry, against having one. The insurance industry wants to survive. So the insurance industry basically got together with the Democrats when there was a Democratic Senate, Democratic House, and a Democratic president the first years of Obama's reign. And they got together and they worked out Obamacare. Obamacare is basically based on Heritage Foundation, which is a think tank that's owned and paid for by the Koch brothers, which basically had a system which was considered free market, or as close to free market as we can get. And basically that's what was put together. Insurance companies would have to have equivalent, comparable plans. The plans would be available in marketplaces. Everybody would have to be insured, so the healthy people would be part of the same risk pool as everybody else. It was better than the system and cheaper, ultimately, than the system for large business, because the risk pools would be bigger, and the risk pools would include more healthy younger people than otherwise. So basically, it turned the healthcare increase has already turned. It's already less. It's already going up less quickly than it had before, and the insurance exchanges are about to come out. A lot of Republican states refuse to do it at the state level, so they're going to be put into the national system. So that's basically it in a nutshell. And that happens on October 1st. They start taking everybody's names and applications, and by January 1st, that will be the system. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. I mean, that will be it. So the bottom line is, unless the Republicans stop it now, Obamacare is going to be the system. And whether people like it, polls say people don't like it that much, but polls also say they like everything that's occurred that's in it. They like that there's no exclusion for pre-existing conditions. They like getting an increase. They like getting a check back. They don't like insurance companies that spend more or increase more than 20% of the total. In other words, at least 80% goes directly to health care, and all their other expenses and surplus and profit and investor share buybacks and bribes to the board of directors and everything else, and golden parachutes are total 20% and no more, not a penny more, or else the insurance companies have to pay people back. So actually, the irony of the whole thing is that they've done studies, and 34% of the people, only 34% of the people like Obamacare, 39% already like the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA, which is what it's really called, and that the people who don't like it has gone down the same 5%. So it's going to be harder and harder once this thing goes into effect to stop the train that may or may not wreck. And if it doesn't wreck, that's going to be embarrassing for Fox News and the Republicans and so on and so forth. So what has happened? What has happened is we've had this weird situation where the House has bluffed itself into passing a continuing resolution defunding Obamacare and sending it to the Senate. That's the situation as of my date. By the time you watch this, this will be incredibly old news. Most likely, the Senate is going to, certain people are going to try to put a cloture, which means to stop it before it's even discussed in the Senate, and that is going to get overridden. There's at least 5 Republican votes, McCain, Graham, and so on and so forth, who basically said, shutting down the government over Obamacare is stupid, and we're not going to buy into it. So once it gets to 60, then they open up the continuing resolution. Senator Reid, and this has probably already happened by the time you see it, will say, I am striking out the Obamacare defunding clause, and we will pass the continuing resolution, and that will pass by the striking out is by majority vote. There's 55 Democratic votes in the Senate, and the passing the whole continuing resolution will pass by a majority vote. It'll go back to the House. So by the time you see this on Wednesday or Friday or next week or the week after, I don't know, but you will know whether the House has decided to shut down the whole government, or even worse, whether the House is going to tie this into the debt default again. This will be the 3rd debt default crisis, and refuse to raise the debt limit and destroy America's ability to borrow money and to raise money. As of today, a blossoming stock market has turned, and I don't know whether it will continue to turn or what. So that's pretty much how that's going on September 20th, and we'll see what happens by the time you watch this show. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is I saw just kind of a comment by a guy named John Messerly, and this guy just happened to work for Microsoft. He's a tech guy. He has some patents that are not in his name. They're owned by Microsoft. And he had some very interesting comments. And basically, he was saying something that I've said in a few other shows before this, that the jobs are not coming back. And he had an interesting concept of this, and how many people does it take to serve how many customers? Originally, in the agrarian society, there was pretty much a farmer could produce 10% more than his family consumed, and then the other 10% went to everybody else in society, the priests, the noblemen, and everybody else, the scribes. So everything else was about 10%. Now we have less than 1% of the people, possibly 2%, if you count the people who actually process and make the food, working in agriculture. So 98% we are fed with the other 2%, 50 to 1. So, or in some cases 100 to 1. So the result was, what do we do with all those people? How do we get money into their hands to feed them? And we had the industrial economy. Well, I've been doing some research over here, and all production of goods, that's construction, manufacturing, food, everything but actually making the food, only employs 18.6 million people. That's down from 20 million. And in fact, our manufacturing output, our GDP associated with manufacturing, is up, and it's way up compared to where it was before. So what the heck are the other people doing? Well, 20.6 million are working for the federal government, the military, the state governments. They're filling out the Social Security checks and everything else. So that's 20, and they're picking up the garbage and all this other stuff. Everybody else is in service. We have a service economy. 95 million people are in the private service economy. And who are these people? Because Just in leisure and hospitality, the people working in the restaurants and in the hotels, 14 million people. That's almost as many people as make everything that's made in this country. 4 million are, 8 million people are in finance. They're working in banks and insurance companies. Business services, what the heck are they? The executives, the consultants, and so on and so forth, the lawyers, the admin people, 18.5 million people. We have more people in professional services than we do making everything that we eat or consume in any way. So what happens when we have a situation like this guy John Messerly pointed out, where Twitter has 300 employees and 300 million customers? There's one employee per million customers. And if they get another customer, they don't hire another person. So the result is we have a near disaster as far as new employment is concerned. So we've lost all the people in retail. By the way, retail is 14 million people right there. Wholesale is 5 million. There's 20 million people selling the products that are being made by 18 million people. But that is going down. How many people work in as clerks in video stores? How many people work in bookstores? Almost none, because those particular industries are gone. Electric stores and so on and so forth. So we're having a real problem. And the jobs that are disappearing are being automated away. And how do we get money back into the economy that are not being spent by the people not being hired? And that is going to be the question for the future. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal employee, retired and proud of it.